I guess we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. It is March 15th. What is this, the Ides of March? Isn't that it?
This is, yes,
The
I
Ides
think
of
you're
March.
right.
There's some sort of significance to this date.
It's just avoid senators.
Okay, yeah, I do that
Yeah,
anyway.
that's a normal rule. That's a standard life rule for me.
Great. So I'm really excited that everybody's here. And I don't know, Josh, how are you doing? What's going on over there?
Look, I'm just really excited this week that finally there's some sort of, answer coming to this whole block size limit debate. Slowly, people are sort of heading towards that 2 meg thing, and finally it's going to be resolved, which is fantastic because
What
I'm
is
just.
it? What's the resolution? I don't know about this. I mean, people don't consult me on these things. I'm not really sure why. But we could also bring Ryan into this conversation. Ryan, just wanted to say hi. Ryan Singer, everybody. He's coming in. I'm really excited. A good friend of mine, and he's got some really cool projects. So before we launch into these projects, we could loop you into the block size thing. So what's the latest, guys? Fill me in, because imagine that I don't know anything about tech stuff.
Well,
That'll be hard to imagine.
We've proposed a new rule where blocks are not valid unless Tatiana signs them.
Oh, well, that's appropriate. Right. I'm very busy, though. I don't know if I could be taking time away from my valuable day to ensure that. No, really, what happened?
Oh, well, I mean, it's not like anything major happened, but I get a feeling from what I'm reading is that I mean, we're seeing more and more people turn on turn on classic nodes, which for me, I mean, I just want us to move forward. But I think what it shows is that people are like, look, we want to head towards 2 blocks. Not that we want to head away from core or the core developers, but that, look, we want to head towards bigger blocks and trying things like thin blocks, and I think as this evolves, because people are starting to get a bit scared, they're looking at other blockchains that haven't got, well, like Ethereum, for instance, it's not designed as a currency, so it's infinite in amount in terms of tokens. So people, I think, are getting a bit confused and going over to Ethereum currently. But I think it's an exciting time, because I think this debate of having a bigger block is a really important debate, and people are seeing it as this scary thing that's, look, we're all over the place, but really we're nailing out a very, very important decision as a community, as an anarchic community, as a community without any centralized authority to make the to really solidify a decision. So it's an interesting way of going forward. Ryan, how do you see the whole picture?
Honestly, I'm a little confused as to why it's become so noisy, right?
Yeah.
So for me, complaining about the fees being too high and not using Bitcoin when the fees float based on minute-to-minute demand or demand to get into the next block, it kind of sounds like a Yogi Berraism, right? Like nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. And so personally, I think that's kind of bullshit, right? If the fees are too high and nobody uses it, then the fees will go down and people will use it again. There's always going to be this relationship between the strongest proof of work network being a good place to anchor things like Factom and the cost per anchor of doing so being the transaction fee. And that's always going to be a supply and demand thing, regardless of what we decide on block size. And there will always be a variable demand for getting into blocks. So the fee will always float. And so I don't feel the sense of urgency that I hear coming out of people like Peter Smith and Brian Armstrong. I just don't feel it. The fact that blocks are full a lot of the time and that fees are there seems to be working as intended. What does scare me is this move from a relatively calm, relatively academic, relatively engineering consensus-driven development model that we've had so far, which has reminded me very much of IEEE, towards this political party, rolling votes by the miners, no confidence is discussed a lot, model that seems much more like the British Parliament. And frankly, I think moving from engineering consensus as a way of adopting BIPs and as a way of improving core to there are competing projects that are competing for minor political party support, a la the British Parliament, is an enormous step backwards in governance. And I think that that's a very scary phenomenon, regardless of how you feel about is a blockchain size increase a good way to deal with recent trends in the fee market?
So, I mean, just the thing is that, we now, I think what a lot of concern people have is that the core developers are sitting behind a company who has interest in second-tier Bitcoin transactions, second-tier technology, sitting on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, and so there's no real incentive to make the core protocol scale. I mean, not no incentive. Definitely there is incentive, but there's not as much incentive. Do you see that as a concern that people that I'm talking to are saying?
I believe it's a concern that's overblown, and it's overblown in service of this more raucous parliamentary-style democracy that the forks are pushing, right? I think that first of all, not all of the core developers are major shareholders in Blockstream. Second of all, Blockstream is nowhere near the only company trying to build second-order applications on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. So am I. So is David. Right? Lots of companies are. And third, when you look at how other foundational, internet-wide network services are designed, things like TCP/IP or HTTP or other services that people rely on to secure the internet in a relatively decentralized way, those decisions are made by engineering consensus, and a controversial decision does take longer to make, and an urgent and controversial decision won't get made, and that's a feature and not a bug.
So, sorry, Tatiana, I think you've got a question, but just quickly ask. The thing that I'm seeing is that there's definitely this this engineering consensus that you could go by, but at the same time, what we're seeing is because at the end of the day, we've got users, dumb users, who basically just want their phone. Oh, pizza, boom. They don't care how it happens. They just want it to happen. And when they hear that there's something scary or something's not being upgraded or this sort of stuff, so we are battling against also the user.
That's right. And frankly, shame on Brian Armstrong for bringing us to that position. I think that everybody who's been involved in politicizing the block size debate and in making it a political party thing that's marketing to users directly as, you should support core, or you should support classic, or anything like that, I think those people should be ashamed of themselves.
Right. So even if that's the case now, so Brian's come out with this statement saying that the round table wasn't, it's a little bit too late, a little bit too little, and a little bit too late, and all this sort of stuff. So if people are, people are jumping ship, that's what I'm noticing, is they're starting to herald the rise of Ethereum and stuff like that, which I think is, is interesting. But I think, Bitcoin is far ahead of the curve. But we have people that are uneducated in the
from a market
details.
perspective, people jumping ship will lower the fees and solve the problem. That's a feature, not a bug, right? Like right now, the bug is this tremendously painful and distracting and disturbing debate, which is causing bad things to be written about Bitcoin over and over and over again in the New York Times and the Washington Post. That is a problem, much more so than whatever the fees happen to be today, or whatever people project the fees will be in 6 months. Is a much bigger problem. Again, people talking about people jumping ship because of large fees sounds to me like a logical fallacy from day one. Because if you're saying the reason I don't go there is it's too crowded, then you're part of the solution. By making it less crowded, you're solving the problem, right? I think.
But some would say that it's crowded because of this artificial cap being put there that doesn't have to be there. And I see the other side of it is, well, if you don't have it there, then there is a centralization that could happen, and the point word there is could happen, because there's still no data, so it's interesting.
So Bitcoin doesn't differentiate between legitimate transactions and spam transactions. Any transaction that's respending an input by the keys that properly control that input is a technically valid transaction. As a result, you need a cap somewhere. Should that cap be 1 megabyte or 50 megabytes is an open question, but you need a cap.
Or half a megabyte.
Or half a megabyte, but you need a cap so that the fee market can raise the price of transactions to the point that spam is unaffordable. Right? That's a critical feature.
Now, what would you say that about people? I've always been under the impression that the fees were basically there not for anything else but spam protection and to eventually take over from mining rewards. And so as we head towards the second halving now, fees will take more of start becoming more interesting in terms of the incentive to mine. You can go either way, and this is typical when you're in in sales. Is you can either have your product cheap and go for volume, or expensive and go for a smaller pool.
It is
most people would say
not to lose money on every transaction and make it up on volume. That can be a problem, right? I think you'll see that fees right now are about 1% of the income per block. If the block's reward halves without a change in the block size, I think what you'll see is they'll about double to about 2% of income per block, which still won't be very significant for the miners. But again, mining is perfectly competitive. You can turn your mining hardware off when you're not anticipating a profit on the next block, and you can turn it back on when you are, based on the current price of Bitcoin, the current mining rewards, the current average fees, and the current, or at least the current fees per block, and the current price of electricity where you are. So you'll never see a lot of spare mining capacity that is easily visible to the network, and you'll never see a lot of mining capacity that's unprofitable. You'll always see the rough price that the miners believe they're paying in marginal cost to mine being equal to the rough marginal revenue of mining. And so that's a problem that takes care of itself. It's a very good market dynamic where the supply of Bitcoin mining always fits the demand for Bitcoin mining given the price of Bitcoin and the amount of fees paid.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic because it kind of would say that that Bitcoin actually gets its value from the price of coal or something that creates electricity, but as a major player in where the price discovery of Bitcoin
Bitcoin gets its value from supply and demand, just like everything else. There's no such thing as an intrinsic, and nothing gets its value from something other than supply and demand. The supply of Bitcoin, from a global macro perspective, is fixed, but in reality, people move in and out of the Bitcoin market based on their own price sensitivities and their own inventory, right? So mining marginal cost is a function of the supply of Bitcoin, but it's not the only one. There's also merchant processor volume is another function of the supply of Bitcoin when it comes to pricing. And there's also whatever the internal pricing preferences are for large holders of Bitcoin like Roger or Eric.
Okay.
Tatiana? Are you going to turn off your
honestly,
miner?
I mean, I think that I'm more interested in Ryan's blockchain health thing. Like, I don't care about this. Sorry. I mean,
All
I'm
right.
glad
Well,
you guys do. I'm sure that some of the listeners do, but I think that some of the more starting listeners don't know the difference between core and classic. So, I don't know. Sorry.
I encourage them to not research it.
Yeah. Why is that? Wait, why do you say that?
Because I think that this uninformed and uneducated battle about the block size that has become over politicized, and we need to move back towards building important engineering infrastructure and away from trying to do political parties of miners.
Okay, fair enough. Why don't we talk about blockchain health?
Okay.
I'm really excited about this. Ryan, for people who don't know your background, can you give me a little bit of, how you got into Bitcoin and what your previous projects were and things like that, real quick?
Absolutely. So I've been working in kind of open source software and open standards for the last 15 years of my life, since I was a teenager. And in 2011, I was a researcher at Stanford University at the Peace Innovation Lab, looking at how distributed systems could improve peace and trade on the internet in kind of a non-state global fashion. And I discovered Bitcoin, and I got really interested in it. And in early 2012, I met Jared Kenna of Tradehill fame. And in 2012, we decided to relaunch Tradehill as an enterprise exchange serving Bitcoin companies and hedge funds. And since then, I've started 3 other Bitcoin companies, CryptoCorp with Miran Cooperman, that eventually reformulated itself as Blockstack and got bought by Digital Asset Holdings. Blockchain Clearing, which builds clearing infrastructure for banks based on Bitcoin technology. And the newest one is Blockchain Health. Blockchain Health builds mobile applications for patients to be able to centralize all of their healthcare data on their own devices, securely encrypted on their own devices, and share it just between them. And they can share it with third parties and revoke those shared with third parties in a very modular, granular way, defend their own privacy, control their own privacy, and all of those shares and revocations will be kept in a service-wide Merkle tree that will be chained together, that will be periodically anchored in the Bitcoin blockchain, so that everybody's looking at the same blockchain for what's been shared with who and what's been revoked, and that blockchain is gaining the immutability properties from Bitcoin.
Okay. Sounds good. Is anybody else doing something like this? Why hasn't anybody else thought of that?
So there are 3 different kinds of startups in healthcare, as far as I can tell. There are the startups that want to do as much as they can with the users without providing anything to or from physicians and other care providers, and they're doing that for regulatory compliance reasons. There's a law called HIPAA that governs health data that makes security breaches or privacy breaches the fault of whoever was involved with them, and it's really scary. So that's why you see health apps like Fitbit or MyFitnessPal focus on users without focusing at all on healthcare. And then another group are the electronic medical records, or EHRs, and they focus on selling directly to healthcare providers like hospitals and doctors. And what they do is they automate the doctors and other care providers' business processes, and they're mostly used for record keeping and billing. They're roach motels for data. They make it really, really easy for the data to come in, but because it's really just there for business process automation and billing, it's not very useful to export it from there. And so nobody spends the money to do so. And then the third kind of health app are health lockers like Blockchain Health, but the health lockers are mostly cloud services. I'm thinking like Microsoft's Health Vault or getmetal.com. And what they do is they aggregate data from multiple sources on online databases, with the goal being building the most complete online database so that the data could be useful for the patient, but also for research purposes. The problem with that is cloud services holding your private data become less secure over time as they become more valuable over time, which is terrifying. You know, if you were upset when your payment data was leaked from Target, or when federal employees' background data was leaked from OPM. It's got to be even more scary that GetMetal or Microsoft's Health Vault is vulnerable to the same kinds of attacks. Hypervisor attacks from the virtualization vendor, database leaks, rogue employees, things like that. So this whole model of centralize everything you can in the cloud is great from a data science perspective, but terrible from a privacy perspective. With blockchain health, we take the opposite approach, where we believe that the most data about the patient should be on the patient's own devices. The patient themselves should have the most clear view about them. And if people want their data, they should have to ask them. And it's perfectly legitimate to ask for their data for research purposes, but it means that you'd have to send out a page saying, I'm looking for data like this, and let the patients respond with their data, which means building those research databases not by hoovering up everything you can get access to, but instead per query based on what you're trying to research and who wants to participate.
So I'd love to see get a feel of how this would work for a user. What's the, I mean, we see that if I'm a person that needs to go to the doctor, has some condition, I have you mentioned a device. I'm guessing that's a cell phone, a smartphone of some sort with some sort of good security behind it.
Well, smartphones have pretty good security by default these days. Both Apple and Android are encrypted by default for encryption on disk. They have biometrics, which are not good passwords, but they are good usernames. And they have modern crypto libraries. Every modern smartphone is capable of running a Bitcoin wallet. Every modern smartphone is capable of kind of secure key management. There is some malware floating around, but it affects less than 1% of Android devices, and nowhere near that number of iPhones.
Yeah, and you've got really clever companies like Rivets and other companies playing with the TEE, the Ledger as well, really going in there to the specific chips that are designed to hold private keys. So yeah, the environment is quite secure. If so, I walk into a doctor and I ask, look, can I have these records? He of course needs to comply depending on the country.
We're looking at starting with blood tests, radiology, and prescription data, because those are already very well standardized formats that are designed to share between institutions. Most of the time when you get a blood test, the lab that's giving you the blood test doesn't just work with your doctor, they work with doctors that are in different institutions, likewise radiologists, likewise pharmacies. So those sharing standards are pretty good. So the idea being, a doctor asks you to get a blood test, and when you get the blood test, either the lab or the doctor says, would you like a copy of this test for your records to show other care providers or to keep? And you say yes. And when they say, how would you like it? You can say, I would like it digitally, actually. Could you use free tools from blockchainhealth.co to get it onto my phone? And then all they would do is they would load that tool, either browser-based or desktop-based, because most care providers use Windows desktops. And they'd load that tool. They'd select the files that represent your tests, and it would present you a QR code that you could very easily scan with your phone to do a key exchange and to import it into your locker.
How are people going to how are people going to know to install this app? Like, what would be the incentive for people, especially, old people? They go to the doctor a lot, but they don't they don't know how to use a regular handheld phone, much less a cell phone. So how would you guys go over the hump with that?
Well, we're going to start with trying to market using a Kickstarter probably in the fall. That's the goal for the Kickstarter will be to attract a small group of passionate users that will be involved both in testing and in making feature requests and in encouraging their healthcare professionals to become compatible. So the nice thing in America is the law is firmly on the patient's side when it comes to controlling your own health data. When you request it, the care providers are required to give it to you. They're required to give it to you in the format that they have it in, if you can accept it that way. If you can't, they're required to agree with you on a format. And that includes telling you how much it would cost to implement formats you request. And if you can't agree on a format, then they have to give it to you on paper. So what's nice about this is once we get this this passionate early group of patients that are good self-advocates that understand technology, that want to be the digital custodians of their own healthcare data, then we can run a much more, I guess you would say, V for Vendetta style marketing campaign, where patients that want their stuff can ask healthcare institutions that may not necessarily want to share it, get inflated costs, and then we can do marketing around this institution is saying it's going to cost them 10 grand or 100 grand to use free tools. So ideally, we make an example of the first few hesitant medical institutions, and we get people to start believing in a future where the user is the gatekeeper and not the care institution.
Will people be incentivized? When you had first talked to me about this idea, there was the question about people sharing their data with, I guess, drug companies and then getting compensated for that data. Is that something that you guys have thought about anymore, or maybe you could tell me a little bit about that?
So we thought a little bit about that. So one of the reasons that services like Microsoft's Health Vault and GetMetal can do what they do is because there's a big data benefit from getting a lot of data from a lot of users. And so if they get the user's permission as part of using their product to centralize that data into a big database, then that database becomes very valuable for research, for both for universities and drug companies and governments. Obviously, in our system, there's no central database that's useful for research. So the question is then, how do we fulfill that vital social role? Right? You still want to understand the population better from a public health perspective. You still want to be able to do useful drug research to build better pharmaceuticals. The model we're imagining is a model where researchers will describe the population they're looking for. It sends a page out to the whole network, and your phone, when it receives the page, can make first a determination as to whether or not they're looking for your data, and then second, if they are, you can decide whether or not to furnish your data. And what you think about is not only what they're going to do with it, but also potentially what's in it for you. So we can get in a situation where instead of a pharmaceutical company or a university or a government buying data from a data aggregator or a health exchange or a clearinghouse, they could instead buy data directly from the patients who are contributing their data. So instead of paying $500,000 for 500,000 users' data, you instead could pay $1 per user to 500,000 users, and they furnish the data directly, and the researcher gets the database kind of per query. So we think that's an enormously compelling model that'll result in not only better data for research, but also better patient privacy and patients being directly compensated when they're sharing their data for commercial reasons.
It's a fascinating model. I really like it. I really like the fact that people can, and I'm presuming they can get paid in Bitcoin by the pharmaceutical companies. So.
Honestly, I would probably say that the system would do Bitcoin by default for payouts. Maybe the pharmaceutical company pays Blockchain Health in dollars and we do the exchange. But depending, I don't think any pharmaceutical companies are currently large owners of Bitcoin. But I wouldn't mind doing it that way because I love a way to pay the users where the user isn't disclosing additional private information as part of taking the payment. Every dollar-denominated method of paying involves revealing something about your banking arrangements to the payor, but Bitcoin does not. So I'd love a world in which patients share their data when they're getting directly compensated, but they're only sharing the data that's directly useful for the research. They're not sharing extraneous data, which has privacy costs without benefit.
So last question from me, 4 minutes left in this half an hour. So I go to the doctor, I say, okay, use the upload tool. The upload tool then allows the data to go directly to my device through some sort of encrypted channel, I'm guessing, that you guys supply.
The purpose of the upload tool is to make it so that the doctor's computer can get your keys for your phone, encrypt the data so that only your devices can read it, and then send it to them. Whether it's a peer-to-peer transfer or it's through some sort of cloud sync service, has almost no difference from the user's perspective, so long as the data is end-to-end encrypted, so that only the patient's devices can read it.
And then the hash is inserted in the blockchain or some sort of Merkle tree that
right.
you guys structure, and then that Merkle tree hash is put in. For the folks at home who don't understand what a Merkle tree is, well,
that's what I was. That was the folk at home. I was like, "What's a Merkle tree?"
It's got nothing to do with Chancellor Merkel from Germany planting trees. I can tell you that much. No, look, folks, keep listening. Subscribe to the show. That's what I would say. And one day we'll explain the Merkle tree for you. It's really not that hard, but.
But a way to think about it is we'll run a high-speed private blockchain that's periodically secured by the Bitcoin blockchain. So it's not quite a side chain, but it's reasonable to think of our service as a blockchain that runs on top of the Bitcoin blockchain and uses the Bitcoin blockchain for some security and immutability functions.
Some anchor. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, where can people find you? Where can they sign up? And so wait, when do you think I can use Blockchain Health? You're going to do your Kickstarter or whatever, a crowdfunding campaign in
probably in the fall, so September or November, I think.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, we'll be building things, and Tatiana, you'll be one of the first people invited to try it out.
I'm excited. That's really cool. Excellent.
Is
What's the website?
Be a global thing?
We're focused on the U.S. right now because healthcare standards vary country to country, and so do patient privacy laws. But the goal is to be global because, frankly, patients are global. You know, any patient that travels internationally needs to be able to share their data with their new physicians wherever they are. If you get injured in Germany, you don't care that Germany has different data standards.
Yeah, I had that problem. I had surgery in Australia, and then I came over to Germany. It was really hard to get everything sorted. It's different language. There's all sorts of problems. So I see this as a really, really good solution. I really like it.
Thank you.
Super cool. I really am excited about this. I think this is one of those things where you can explain to people about Bitcoin and you don't have to, I don't know. Like, I think that people could get on board with this and they'll see how it relates to their own life. I think that's really cool. So thank you, Ryan, very much for being on the show. You're going to be at the Agentic Group talk tomorrow, giving a talk, right?
Yeah, but about my other business, blockchain clearing.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that.
That's okay. Next time.
We could definitely do it next time. Ryan, what are your links one more time?
Yeah, if you'd like to learn more about blockchain health, go to blockchainhealth.co in your web browser. And please, if you'd like to be involved, don't hesitate to send me an email at that website.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Bye, Ryan. Peace out. And next up, for the second half hour of the Tatiana Show, we're going to be bringing on David Johnston, who's been a leader in the Bitcoin space for a very long time, but now he's the chairman of Factom. So thank you for joining us today, David. How's it going?
It's going really well. Thanks for having me on, Tiana.
Very good. So you're in, what, Austin right now?
Yep. It's beautiful and like 75 degrees out, and yeah, Austin, Texas.
Don't lie to me. I've heard that the allergies right now are outrageous. My friend is dying. She can't even get around the house without a tissue attached to her face.
Oh, I'm too lucky that I don't have allergies. So it's my paradise.
I've got an allergy against banks and governments somehow.
I have a fear of going to Austin during South by Southwest just because every time, invariably, I always get sick within a couple days of being there. And I'll actually be there in a couple weeks for the Libertarian Party National Convention. No, not National Convention, State Convention in San Antonio. Are you going to be going to that?
Probably have to travel for Factom, so I won't be around, but enjoy the time in Texas. It'll be beautiful.
I really love coming to Texas. I have a lot of good friends, and I'll probably be going on the Crypto Show, which is one of the shows on LTV who carries the show. If people are at home and they want to maybe come to see me. Jeffrey Tucker is speaking, Bob Murphy, Julie Borowski, Lynn Ulbricht will also be doing a talk. So it's a 3-day thing in San Antonio, April 8th through the 10th. And I'll bring my guitar. I'm going to be on a Bitcoin panel, so that'll be really fun. I always find it kind of funny that even though libertarian philosophy is interwoven with a lot of Bitcoin stuff, like old school libertarians are really not that into Bitcoin, right? They're interested, but they're still kind of like, a little wiggly about it. So I hope that this time will be a good opportunity to teach people a little bit about it and go from there.
Yeah, I find because of the business I'm in with gold, people of that school of thought, of the old school libertarian front, really start to understand that well, you can have gold and instantly convert into something that's globally acceptable and sendable like an email. And you can have gold, which is this beautiful 3,000 plus years of secure storage of value and human understanding of how to secure that value. So they tend to scratch their heads and go, wow, yeah, I get it now. So I think, the more that we reach out to them, we have a lot of in common with the libertarian, older generations of gold bugs and stuff.
And ultimately, I think, as you're saying, Josh, it really boils down to utility, right? People get something when they use it for the first time, right? It's like if you tried in the early days of the internet to explain, how transformational the web would be, most people didn't care until there was a website that served a particular interest of theirs. I don't know, sports statistics or, collectors of baseball cards or whatever, right, was their thing. All of a sudden the internet, was useful, right?
Yeah.
I remember for myself, I was trading stocks when I was pretty young in the late 90s. And, for me, the first use of the internet was being able to access an E-Trade account that I ran with my dad and, access all the charts and all the online stuff. And so for me, that was like a lifeline to the outside world. And so the internet became really, really important, but before that, in the abstract, things are less interesting than when you start using them.
Absolutely, I noticed that with Bitcoin. As soon as I can go on all night to someone about Bitcoin. At the end of the night, they're sort of yeah, whatever. But if I send them, $1,
right,
and I say, hey, send 5 cents back, their mind just blows, and they're just like, well, okay, I get it. Wow, this is, and they become converts really quickly. So yeah, you're right.
Sure.
Yeah, do you find that, Tatiana?
I think, actually talking about sending people Bitcoin, so I always think this is a blessing and a curse, right? Clearly I'm not that great with tech. I mean, when you guys are talking about adopting technologies, my dad tried to buy me a laptop once, and I was like, ew, why would I want that? Get that away from me. I mean, this is my level. So, I think that there is a challenge of getting people into Bitcoin, but yesterday I tested out this project, I Pay You. And I found it to be the easiest way of sending Bitcoin that I've ever seen so far. They're beta testing it right now. They're not going to launch for another month or so. But basically, all I had to do was send in somebody's email, and it was really simple. And all of a sudden, I was just sitting there sending people $5, $10 for you, $5 for you. And it was super simple. And that, to me, was super exciting because I think that I tried to set up an Ethereum wallet the other day, and it was embarrassing how long it took me. And I know what, these wallets are supposed to do generally, right? Theoretically, I should know what I'm doing with that. And I couldn't get it to work. So when I see something where I just have to write, enter in dollar amount, password, email address, I'm really psyched. And I think that as time goes on, these things are going to become more easy. And, I think that music is a really cool way to get people involved with Bitcoin. But yeah, you got to find that thing that really turns people on,
Sure.
that really taps into their passion.
Well, and the exciting thing for me is that the whole space is starting to move beyond just payments or merchants or currency, right? We're seeing all these exciting applications and companies springing up that are using the blockchain for things people never imagined, right? Oh, all of a sudden we can use it for health records, and all of a sudden we can use it for information privacy, and all of a sudden we can use it like Patrick Byrne is doing for stocks and stuff like that. So, I think that's how we break into mainstream, is we have to get into all of those different use cases that really appeal to different groups of people, right? Because only so many people care about, digital currency or, value of stored wealth over time, but everybody cares about, something, whether it's their health records or their mortgage or whatever. I think that's really how we break into the mainstream.
So you guys are, Factom are very well in front of the cutting edge when it comes to really novel ideas, which don't, they're not really a big problem in the West, but for instance, land title in some developing countries are quite scary. I mean, your grandfather owns a farm for forever, and you inherit it, and then you go to, I don't know, pay tax or something, and the person says, no, you don't own that. And then it turns out someone that had access to the database changed it, and now they own that property, and there's nothing you can do about it. So something like Factom, where you can lock in land titles and see if it's been changed. Oh, actually, that changed on X day. Are really good. Now, you guys had some dealings with a couple of governments to work with land titles, inserting the hash or something like that into the blockchain. How's that going? Where's it stalling? How are you finding the whole play as it plays out?
It's really interesting. Like you're saying, the big pain point is in the developing world. It's in new economies. We take for granted so much in the West about, oh, I'm just going to sign a contract and the person will honor the contract, or, I can just trust the local municipal court to record my land or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, I just got back from a trip to China, and, the urgency level there is just amazing, because, there's less societal trust between businesses, between people, between government and people in government. And so all of a sudden you say, here's immutable data, here's a way to trust the math instead of trusting the person, and they get it immediately. And they say, oh, that would be great, I could use it for XYZ. And they start explaining to you how they're going to use the technology, which is really amazing to see. Whereas sort of, you go talk to folks in the West, and they're like, I don't know if that's really a pain point. There, they see it for real. And the cool opportunity, especially in places like China, is they're just building a lot of these systems, right? So there isn't 30 years of legacy cruft software, that they have to think about replacing or changing. They're like, oh yeah, we're building the system for that right now. If we build it with this blockchain backend, all of a sudden we have immutability and timestamps and a higher level of trust about what's going on. And that's, I think, where things are going to move really quickly. So in the case of governments, they move really, really slow. Those projects are still moving forward, but government projects are like on a multi-year timeline. I know everybody in the space is excited and they want to see, updates every week, but, it's a long tail process with those big governments. I think where we're going to see faster movement is in places like China, where there's these very aggressive businesses that want to improve things, have a huge market opportunity, and are ready to do business.
Do you think that governments are able to start utilizing blockchain in an efficient way? I mean, people are talking about Estonia, and they're sort of leading the way. But, when I think of government, I think of it as generally something kind of bloated, and it doesn't really work very efficiently. They also benefit from those inefficiencies. They benefit from having lots of extra employees, because then they'll vote for them. So, you've got all these kind of limitations. What has been your experience with pitching to different governments and stuff like that?
I think it certainly helps if it's a forward-looking government, like you mentioned, Estonia, which has already done a lot of stuff with making their systems electronic, digitizing all of their records. So if you already have that kind of basis in place, it's a lot smaller jump to, oh, we're just going to make that data more secure, or we're going to make that data, auditable in real time. And so for them, that's an easy leap. The bigger leap is definitely where you still have a lot of these paper-based records and you're now talking about sort of taking multiple steps to get it there. But governments are sort of slowly getting there. Even those that aren't as innovative are digitizing most of their records at this point. There's been a big push for that globally. So I think it's going to come. I think the areas where it's going to come first are where the most pain is. So not so much in governments, but talking to many of these large corporations, some of their biggest costs are auditing, and some of their biggest costs are compliance, right? And they spend thousands of dollars on auditing loan instruments and things like that. That's where the big pain is, and it's like, okay, I can see a clear path to saving a lot of money by cutting my auditing costs in half, for example, right? And in that case, especially with companies, there's not a lot of entrenched reason to want to keep that auditing cost around. And even big corporations like the KPMGs and Deloittes of the world know that this transition is coming, and up until now, a lot of their revenue has been from sort of that manual auditing process, but they know the world's moving to digital, and they know they would basically want to move up the ladder and start adding more strategic value and advice to the company or helping them improve their processes instead of just billing for a lot of hours of manual auditing. So that's kind of where it's going, and I think that's why you've seen like KPMG sponsoring some of these blockchain conferences, or Deloitte's big announcements about their efforts in China and elsewhere. So I think that's the place it's going to start. It's amazing in blockchain, like you can do anything with immutable data, but okay, once you sort of get past that revelation, it becomes, okay, what's the most important thing? What's the most valuable thing to do first, right? Because it's going to take us 5-10 years to roll out blockchain as a backend for all of the world's data systems, but there's some use cases that are maybe worth a millionth of a penny, and there are some use cases that are probably worth $1,000 a document. So it's about, I think, finding those really big pain points and focusing in on those, as opposed to sort of getting distracted by the breadth of the opportunity.
I have a question for you. What do you think about all these other companies getting involved in this space? Will they, even though they have much larger resources, right, and they do, will they be able to do things as well as some of the people who have been in the space since the beginning? I guess they can buy talent, right? But can they really, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think like the old school companies can provide better services than some of these larger kind of institutional initiatives?
Well, in the case of the big consulting groups, the KPMGs and Deloittes and E&Ys, it's sort of outside of their core competency to spend a lot of time building software. So their business model is really driven by taking pieces of software from, IBM or SAP or Oracle or Factom or any of these different enterprise software companies, and rolling that out inside of an organization, right? So they say to a big bank, hey, we could save you $10 million a year if we roll out these pieces of software, sign a contract with us, our experts will go in and help roll it out. And so I think what's going to happen is you've got these different blockchain companies that have the real deep expertise, and they will educate the market, and people will start to say, oh, I can really improve my business by adopting this technology. And then these consultants will say, yep, and we can help you do that, and we can help it roll out within your organization. And honestly, companies like Factom, we don't want to do that, right? We're not a consulting company. We don't have 20 years experience with all these banks and know all their internal processes or who the project managers are, right? That's an expertise unto itself. So rather than trying to go up that learning curve for a decade, I think the wiser move is to simply work with these consulting companies, educate them about what the blockchain can do, and then get them to start rolling that out within these organizations. I think that's pretty much what's going to happen.
Okay, cool. Josh, you have any questions?
Yeah, I think the low-hanging fruit for immutable data, meaning data that you can store in a database which can't be changed, is really like these countries that really haven't got all this entrenched systems in place already, like the developing world have already haven't got this stuff, so they're ready to take on board some of these new ideas. For instance, the typical example is in Kenya with M-Pesa, them just jumping past banking straight, or jumping past landlines. That's the big example, landline going straight to the mobile. And I think that's why I really see it kind of as low-hanging fruit, but at the same time they're very suspicious and they're not that technical, and so it can be hard. So there's this sort of to and fro. Are you finding that?
Well, it really depends on the country. So yes, a lot of these developing countries sort of have different assumptions. So for instance, I go to China, and everybody's got a smartphone, and everybody's on WeChat, and WeChat has built-in payments like PayPal or any other payment provider, and people are just scanning the QR code and paying with their phone, and that is their reality today, right? And so they've sort of a lot of the population is still unbanked, but they're getting there very, very quickly. And the companies that are taking off in China are mobile first, right? Even the big insurance companies, even the big banks there, all have mobile apps, and they're signing up as fast as people get smartphones to have those financial services. And so, yes, they're probably never going to go to a branch. They're probably not going to have a Western banking experience, but they're going to start with different assumptions. But regardless of that, the same problems are still there. A lot of the world is record keeping, right? If you think about a bank, an insurance company, it's really just a big stack of records, right? Who owns which account? Who owes so much money? Who got the loan, right? And as soon as you try to move those records outside of one organization into another, that's where the problem comes in, right? Because there's not a lot of trust, especially after the financial crisis, right? Even in the US, between the banks, between the insurance companies. Nobody wants the liability for somebody else's loan, for example, right? And so the idea all of a sudden that these entities don't have to trust each other, they can just check the math, is really revolutionary for when it comes to inter-business type of arrangements, right? Blockchain is useful to an extent within an organization, becomes really useful as soon as you exit an organization, and it's an insurance, let's say it's an insurance claim, and you have the person involved, the person that was hit, the insurance company, the person in charge of collecting the money, maybe another insurance company. You got 5, 6, 7 parties. All of a sudden, if you can streamline those records, things become a lot easier. Things become a lot faster. Or take supply chains, right? People accept funds 90 days later, 120 days later for products they provide to a manufacturer. A lot of the times because they're waiting for records to process across one organization to another organization, right? And so these are enormous pain points that we sort of finally fundamentally address. And so it doesn't really matter if you're in the first world or the third world. That's been an unsolved problem for a long time, and I think that's where it gets really exciting.
So for the folks at home that don't know what Factom is, and I guess we should have done this at the start of the interview, but you guys have been around for a while, so I sort of assume that people know, but just to give a really sort of LE5 style roundup, explain it to me like I'm 5 kind of thing of how does Factom work? What is Factom?
Factom makes data and documents honest. We make it impossible to lie. It's as simple as that. It checks if documents entered into the system have changed, and if they haven't been changed, then you can verify with math that they're correct. And it doesn't matter who hands you the document. You don't have to trust them, whether it's a corner bank or a giant institution. It all goes back to checking the math. And so I think Paul Snow, the inventor of Factom, put it beautifully when he said, honesty is really subversive in the sense that by adding honesty to these systems, right? You're achieving a level of transparency, a level of reform that you could never achieve through law, right? That you could never hope to impose through regulation, but all of a sudden, through math, you've made that level of transparency and honesty possible. And so that's really exciting to me. And so that's what Factom does. And ultimately, the cool thing is we're getting beyond sort of explaining how the tech works, and trying to explain peer-to-peer networks and blockchains and things like that. And what's really interesting is what you can do with it, right? And this is about applying that to real-world problems. And I think that's why Factom has gotten so much traction and had 300+ articles and coverage in the Wall Street Journal and Fortune and Financial Times. It's because we're going after really, really tough problems, and a lot of them, it's interesting. These are all different verticals. We talked about land titles, we talked about mortgages, we talked about auditing, but they're all just record keeping, right? Are the records true, right? Are the records honest? And so it's really cool that we're taking this technology that people have been sort of excited about in the engineering community and applying it to problems that people see in the real world and can really get their head around.
What's the difference between me personally just entering a hash of a document into the blockchain by adding it to a note to a Satoshi or something, than putting it through Factom?
So if you just have a single document, it's pretty cheap just to drop it in the blockchain. You pay the minimum fee, 5 cents, 10 cents, whatever it is today. But imagine you're an enterprise. Imagine you have literally 1 billion data points each day that you need to timestamp and make immutable. There's only room in the blockchain, at least today based on the current block size, for a few 100,000 entries per day. That's it, like total. And so when these enterprises realize that, they say, oh, I can't use the blockchain. And that is a technical barrier that has kept a lot of them from really seriously experimenting with it because they haven't seen a technical path forward. And so all of a sudden with Factom, you can aggregate together all these entries at the Factom layer, and every 10 minutes it forms a block and anchors it to the blockchain with a single transaction. And so no matter how much data gets poured in here, gigabytes and terabytes of data, it all still gets anchored with a single transaction. And so it's really a question of scalability. All of a sudden, you can scale this to use cases where you have billions or eventually even trillions of data points that you want to make immutable, but you don't have the space for today if you were to put them each into the blockchain by themselves.
Where do you host do you guys offer to host these documents as well? Is that something that's going to be planned with something like storage or some of these decentralized hosting solutions, or are people asked to host or secure their own documents and just have Factom as the proof of unchangeability?
So, I mean, we certainly have a preference for decentralized systems, and I'm a big fan of, made safe, safe network, and storage. But ultimately, we're storage agnostic. So a lot of these enterprises already have a legacy Oracle database or SAP or some existing system, and rather than try to replace that system, all we're trying to do is add a blockchain backend, right? So they can use the Factom API, they can write the data from their existing system, they can check it later on to make sure it's still valid, and they didn't have to change anything big about their system. And so for a lot of the businesses we talk to, that's really, really attractive, right? Because replacing their software might be like a 5-year deal, but adding a few APIs, okay, we can do that, and they can do it in the near term, right? And so at a minimum, they have their existing system, but all of a sudden they have this blockchain backend they can use for real-time auditing and all these other advantages. So, storage has been a solved problem for a while. It's really cool to see these decentralized solutions coming on, but that's not sort of the core competency we want to focus on. More on the validation of the data, the auditing, and everything else.
This has been great, guys. Thanks very much, David, for telling us everything. Unfortunately, we're up on the hour, so we have to tidy things up. But I don't know. Where can people find out more about Factom?
Really easy. Just go to factom.com and they can check out all the software and see videos about it and all the rest.
Okay, great. We've got Josh with Voltoro.com. We also have news. So we started carrying the show. We're on Liberty.me, which is our home. Let's Talk Bitcoin, which is our home away from home. We're also on LRN.FM, and we are on IPM Nation, which I just got a notification that we're in the top 10 shows. So at IPM Nation. So I thought that was really cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, at Let's Talk Bitcoin.
Hi, IPM Nation.
And all others, don't be segregating. On Let's Talk Bitcoin, though, there's a magic word, right? It's sort of like a proof of listening. David, would you like to do the honors of choosing a magic word or phrase? It can't be like Factom is the greatest. It has to be just a regular thing.
Okay, well, why don't we make the magic word blockchain?
I think that may have been I think that may have been one. How about, okay, wait. Blockchain out of Austin. That's what it's going to be. OUTTA, because in anticipation of my trip there, the blockchain. Okay, so blockchain out of Austin. Great city, great guest. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks to all our different people that put our stuff around. Make sure that you subscribe. My YouTube channel is Forevermore Tatiana, but you can find us everywhere. And any final words, everybody?
Thanks for having us on. Great to see you, Tatiana.
All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. If you want to catch up with me, go to TatianaMrose.com or go to CryptoMediaHub.com. Thanks, everyone. Peace out. Bye.
Bye.